Part 4. At first sight, this kind of explanation makes us think of the scholastic virtues, or of a kind of vitalism. But if we take a deeper look at it, the explanation becomes increasingly more plausible. Qualities and defects of an individual develop with age. Why, rather, would they not also become phyletically accentuated? And that these dimensions, why, or rather how, could they not react on the organism to model it in their image? After all, the ants and the termites certainly manage to reward their warriors or workers with an exterior adapted to their instinct. Are we ourselves not familiar with men and women of prey? See, once we have accepted this, unexpected horizons open out ahead of biology. In order to follow the inklings of living beings, for obviously practical reasons, we are led to use the variation in fossilizable parts. But this practical necessity must not blind us to the limited, superficial quality of such an arrangement. All such pheno-characters, as number of bones, form of teeth, ornamentation of integuments, are actually only the garment molding a deeper support. Fundamentally, there is but one single event in process, the great orthogenesis of everything alive toward a more imminent spontaneity. Secondarily, through the periodic dispersal of this impetus, we have the verticille of small orthogeneses, where the fundamental current divides to form the interior and true axis of each radiation. Finally, we have the veil of tissues and the architecture of limbs cast over all this like a simple sheath. This is the situation. To express the natural history of the world as it actually is, we therefore have to be able to follow it from inside, this time not as a linked succession of structural types replacing each other, but as the rise of inner sap spreading out in a forest of consolidated instincts. In its very depths, the living world is composed of consciousness clothed in flesh and bone. From biosphere to species, everything, therefore, is but one immense ramification of psyche seeking itself through forms. This is where Ariadne's thread leaves us, if we follow it to the very end. Given our present state of knowledge, we certainly cannot contemplate expressing the mechanism of its evolution in this internal radial form. One thing seems clear, however. If this really is the true significance of transformism, or evolutionary theory, then life, insofar as it corresponds to a directed process, could continue along its original line only on condition that at any given moment it undergo some profound readjustment. It is a structural law. Nothing of magnitude can increase without ending up at some critical point, some change of state. We already referred to this as we spoke of the birth of life itself. A maximum ceiling exists for velocities and temperatures. If we continue to increase the acceleration of a body's speed until we approach the speed of light, through excess of mass, it acquires an infinitely inert nature. If we heat it, it melts, then vaporizes. And the same thing applies to all known physical properties. Insofar as we saw the evolutionary movement only as a simple advance toward complexity, we could conceive that it would go on developing indefinitely, without changing, and that there was actually no upper limit to pure diversification. Now that our eyes have discovered not only the quantitative, but the qualitative augmentation of brains, and thus of consciousness, beneath the historically increasing intricacy of forms and organs, we are alerted to the fact that inevitably, in the course of geological ages, an event of a new order, a metamorphosis, was expected to bring this long period of synthesis to a close. We must now turn our attention to the first symptoms of this great terrestrial phenomenon, ending up in the human being. Part 3. The time approaches. Let us return to the movement of the wave of life where we left it, that is, at the expansion of the mammals. Or to locate ourselves in a duration concretely, let us take ourselves in thought, back to the world as we can imagine it toward the close of the Tertiary. At that moment, a great calm seems to reign over the surface of the earth. From southern Africa to South America, and throughout Europe and Asia, there are fertile, rich plains and thick forests. Then more plains and forests. And among this endless vegetation are myriads of antelopes and zebras, varieties of herds of proboscideans, of stags with every kind of antler, of tigers, wolves, foxes, and badgers, just like those today. In short, the landscape is somewhat similar to the remnants we are trying to preserve in our national parks in Zambia, the Congo, or Arizona. Except for a few lingering archaic forms, its characteristics are so familiar to us that we must make an effort to convince ourselves that nowhere at all is there any smoke rising from campsite or village. The period is one of calm profusion. The layer of the mammals has spread out, and yet the evolutionary movement could not have stopped. Surely something is accumulating somewhere, ready to spring up for another leap forward. But what and where? To detect what is ripening at this moment in the womb of the universal mother, let us make use of the index we have at hand from now on. We have just recognized that life is a rise of consciousness. If life is still in progress, this must mean that internal energy is secretly rising at certain points beneath the mantle of the earth in bloom. Here and there, psychic tension is certainly mounting in the depths of nervous systems. Just as the physicist or doctor applies a delicate instrument to the body, so let us move our thermometer of consciousness over nature as it slumbers. At the Pliocene, in what region of the biosphere is the temperature rising? Let us search, of course, among those in the lead. Aside from plants, which clearly do not count, asterisk says, the footnote reads, in the sense that in the plants we are unable to follow the evolution along a nervous system of a psyche that has obviously remained diffuse. Whether or not this psyche exists or grows in its own way is entirely another matter, and we certainly will refrain from denying that it does. To take just one among 1,000 examples, is it not true that we need only to look at the traps for insects set up by certain plants to be convinced that the plant branch, like the other two main branches, does obey the rise of consciousness, even if only remotely? Back to the main text. Aside from plants, which clearly do not count, 2 and only 2 summits of main branches emerge before us into air, light, and spontaneity. On the arthropod side, the insects, and on the vertebrate side, the mammals. To which side does the future belong, and the truth? A. The insects. In the higher insects, a cephalic concentration of nervous ganglions is coupled with an extraordinary wealth and precision of behaviors. To see a world alive around us, both so marvelously adapted and so appallingly remote, makes us stop and think. Are these our competitors? Perhaps our successors? Must we not say, rather, that they are a crowd pathetically trapped and struggling in a dead end? In fact, what seems to eliminate the hypothesis that the insects represent the way out for the evolutionary movement, or even simply one way out, is that, although they are by far the oldest of the higher vertebrates according to the date of their unfolding, they now seem to have irremediably reached their ceiling. Although they have grown endlessly more complicated, perhaps for geological periods, like Chinese written characters, it looks as though they will not manage to change levels, as if their impetus or fundamental metamorphosis has been arrested. Part 5.